Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ron Leonard. I'm the Director of Special Initiatives at the Alabama Commission on Higher Education.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Herman. I'm the Account Manager for Springer Nature in the Southeast region, which includes beautiful Charleston.
And our presentation this afternoon is putting the U back in universal access. By the end of this session, you'll be able to have a working definition of affordable learning. You'll have a better idea of the role the ABL plays in lifelong learning in Alabama. You'll understand why Springer Nature ebooks were chosen and the value they bring to our proposition. And then you'll hear about our ongoing collaboration with Springer Nature. Now I'm going to begin by giving you a little background information about myself and the Alabama Virtual Library, commonly referred to as the ABL. I have been with the Commission for going on 13 years now. The first 8 years, I was the director of the Network of Alabama Academic Libraries. Not NAL, but NAIL. So as the NAIL director, I was primarily responsibility for database licensing. I would negotiate the price, and then if there was a license, I would work on the license. I did that for both NAIL, and I also did it for the ABL. Now, what makes the ABL unique is it's totally supported by the state. It's a state of Alabama entity. We like to think, we refer to as the 3 E's. Excellent resources, equitable to everyone in the state, as well as economical. When you buy essentially in bulk and make it available, make resources available, it really saves the taxpayer money, as opposed to each library, each school buying the same resources. Another way we're a little bit different, actually a couple different ways, we're completely run by volunteers like myself. And when we do buy resources, we make all the resources available to everyone in the state. Now, they include your traditional library resources, encyclopedias, atlases, dictionaries, and more cutting-edge resources, like Visible Body from Ovid. And also, we have, within the last few years, the OER Commons. We have obtained OER Commons because there's been a lot of support among the board of affordable learning. And when I say affordable learning, I'm really referring to making educational resources less expensive, economical for students in particular. A lot of you are familiar with Open Educational Resources, OER, etc. And we have had an OER initiative in my state for the last few years. When I traveled around the state, I realized OER is great, but it's not for everyone. So enter the broader umbrella of affordable learning. Got maybe paying something, but the cost to the student is nominal, if not non-existent. So we went with OER Commons simply because, or primarily because we wanted a repository for OER, but it has a number of other features as well. Now I'm going to let Joe tell you a little bit about the Springer Nature relationship with us.
Thanks so much, Ron. To give a little background, this is about my 2nd year now at Springer Nature as an account manager. And we've been working with Ron as a company for the past 10 years or so when he was at NAIL, again, so we already had a relationship established with Ron. He was a fan of our content as well because I'm sure you guys are aware, Springer Nature, we do lead the industry from a publisher standpoint. We're extremely library friendly. There's completely no DRM, unlimited concurrent users. And again, we've had this partnership with NAIL in the past, which made this conversation with him much easier. And from an account manager point of view, the last thing I wanted to do was offer everything to Ron in the state of Alabama. I wanted to focus more on the relevance and what's relevant to the students. We did conduct a trial for the entire state, which is higher ed, libraries, K through 12. And we did make all of our 2021 copyright year ebooks available during this trial. That included textbooks, scholarly books, volumes, monographs as well. And from this trial, we were able to garner really, really good usage. And we were able to filter down by subject collection as well, and title. which really made it easier for Ron and his team to take a look at that usage and say, okay, what are our students looking to read? What are they looking to get from this trial? And then he also got some really good personal reviews from some of the schools and libraries as well. And from that conversation, they did find that the most usage and the most relevance was in the biomedical and life science collection, as well as our energy collections. Those are the two collections that the AVL decided to go with, and it is now available for the entire state of Alabama. These collections, they are all peer-reviewed. Again, completely DRM free, and what makes it very enticing, it's downloadable and no Wi-Fi necessary, so students can download these titles and read them at their convenience wherever they're located. Moving forward into the future and continuing this relationship with the AVL, we actually just started a trial for our Nature and Scientific American journals. This is very exciting because we do feel like it's more relevant for the lower education, K through 12, some of the libraries as well. So we're really, really interested to see the usage that comes out of that, as well as where that usage is lying in terms of lower education, higher education. So we're really looking forward to that trial ending up soon. And that is it. So if you have any questions, definitely let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I am Nettie Legassi. I'm the Associate Executive Director at NISO, the National Information Standards Organization, and I'm here today to talk to you about one of our newest recommended practices. It is so new, it is not quite out yet. When I submitted this proposal, I did expect that we would have published it by now, but we are still working on the last cleanup elements, but it will be out very soon. And if you're managing or working with audio and metadata resources, it's going to be very helpful. So where did this NISO working group come from? It started before the pandemic, so it's been underway for quite some time. The pandemic did slow this working group down, unfortunately. But the background is that obviously, or we all know that AV material is proliferating. Users are demanding it. So libraries are collecting it, and there are companies more and more providing it. But how do you discover it? How do you index it? Well, you need metadata to do that. But what metadata model to use? There are so many for possible application. And MARC is one. That's what libraries like. But AV material comes in different flavors. So what this group was put together to address was what are the minimum elements, or what are the elements that a packager of AV material can use when sending material to a receiver. How can they talk to each other? So what are the most practical elements to include, and create a vocabulary to aid this connectivity and identify the essential elements. So the recommended practice, when it's available, consists of a checklist of things to cover, links and pointers to standards. This is a list of the members of the working group, and I realize it's pretty small on the screen in practicality, but it does consist, like all NISO working groups, of a cross-current of stakeholders, publishers, system vendors, librarians, of course, consultants, platform aggregators. So everyone had a voice in the makeup of this recommended practice. And as I said, it's meant to connect different existing standards. We are not creating a new standard, it's just how do we connect between existing ones. Not just bibliographic metadata, but different types of metadata that are associated with AV material, such as technical material, administrative material, rights metadata, and accessibility metadata, very important. So what the working group did, and this was a quite slow working group because, as I said, it started before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit and everyone kind of scattered for a while and came back to work together very slowly, was identify the stakeholders, look at all the existing standards and figure out what ones might they narrow down to, because they could not create connections between dozens of different standards. The use cases that are a part of this recommended practice are really a major part, and I think that's meant to help people picture how this recommended practice might help them in a particular area. They composed a list of properties that I'll be showing you in upcoming slides, and then examined those against the existing standards to see if they could be expressed. So kind of tested those out, created a framework for dissemination, and then put it out for public comment, which was earlier this year, and we are now finalizing the responses to those comments. So basically, the properties are intended to provide a non-technical vocabulary to express the information elements to be included in any exchange of a media asset. So for a user, say a provider of AV material who doesn't know Mark 21 or PB Core, that the holder might be characterizing it, can say, all right, I'm using this metadata, but I can fill in these elements, and then you'll know that I'm sending you these elements, and you can pick it up in your metadata model. It is not intended to replace metadata standards, as I mentioned, and it's not a crosswalk. So we're not a translation between metadata standards at all. I'm losing time, so we'll just mention that there are use cases, and I think this is a really practical way for anyone to pick up the recommended practice, match themselves to a use case, and then follow along from there. When they were verifying the use cases, as I mentioned, dozens of different possible standards, and the ones that they examined more closely for application in this recommended practice are PB Core, MODS, EBU Core, Dublin Core, Video Metadata Hub, and of course MARC. The global properties, these should be included in any exchange, contributor, contributor, publisher, citations, peer review versions, and accessibility features. These should be included everywhere. And then in special cases, and there are several different use cases for particular types of material, there are some metadata that should be applied in those use cases. So if you're exchanging an asset that's about a journalism type resource, there's particular metadata elements that you should be sure to include. And we have a website, or you can just Google NISO VAMD, and that will get you to this page. We expect to be publishing this definitely before Christmas, hopefully in the next few weeks. Thank you very much. Oh, let me get out of that.
So I'm Scott Warrenn. I'm the Associate Dean for Research Excellence at Syracuse University. I'm also the Interim Director of the Syracuse University Press. My partner in this, Deirdre Joyce, our Head of Digital Stewardship, is unable to be here, but is really at the heart of this work. What I'm going to talk about today is our integrated model for our digital library and some success stories we've had as a result of that. By digital library in this instance, I mean locally managed content. Nothing I'm talking about today involves third-party licensed content. We've been really working on this for roughly the last half dozen years, strategically developing our capacities, and as a result of that, during that timeline, we've had a number of successes. Some of those are or milestones. Some of those are technical, related to our infrastructure, and some of those are related to our people or our organizational structure. In particular, I want to talk a little bit about two groups that we formed in recent years to deepen our capacity in this area. In the past, we had individuals who were working on both sides of this equation, doing bits of scholarship work, digital scholarship work, bits of digital stewardship work, sometimes doing very, very similar work in different departments in our organization. We realized that by separating these functions out and having people work solely on the scholarship side or on the stewardship side, we could deepen that capacity and extend our resources and then not be sort of duplicating work in differing parts of the organization. In effect, this was one step towards beginning to eliminate what we call digital branch libraries, having one person sort of try to do it all at one time. We've long ago eliminated that for the most part for physical libraries. Now we're starting to do it for our digital library collection as well. Once we had our organizational model in place, then we really looked hard at our workflows and updated them and tried to make them as efficient as possible across the organization in the new structure. We then developed an infrastructure template in which we could place all of our various tools that we're using to do the technical aspects of this work no matter what we're doing, no matter what digital collection we're working with, we said it will fall, the tool used for it will fall into one of these 5 categories. And by developing this template, it allows us to think strategically about what pieces we need to focus resources on. I'm an administrator, so I'm always thinking about what resources do I have available and where can I use them most effectively. So this mapping that Deirdre developed really is significant for us. By putting those things together, you get our integrated model. At the top, we have our organizational structure, which is the people doing this work. Who is doing the work? In the middle, the workflows, or how they are doing the work. And at the bottom, we have our technical infrastructure mapping, or what tools are those people using to do the work. This is actually what that looks like, that technical infrastructure map, as of fall 2022. Now there's a lot going on in this, and I don't expect you to memorize each piece or whatever we have in each slot, but it gives you an idea that this is how we think strategically about where we're developing our different pieces of our infrastructure to manage all of the local digital content, be it from general collections, special collections, institutional repository, any of our other repositories. It all fits, digital curation, digital storage, it all fits somewhere on this. Let me give you now an example, a more concrete example of how we've used this approach. So about 2 years ago, in the upper right quadrant of this structure, we were using an aging Mets manager system that took a lot of local development time, plus an ensemble system to host our AV. Both of those were nearing end-of-life functionality for various reasons, and they were beginning to seriously impact our ability to move forward towards the things that we wanted to accomplish, both for ourselves and for our campus partners. We, after some very, very careful looking around and looking at our options, we chose 2 different systems. We have Kaltura now for our audiovisual, as well as Cortex for our digital collections. And those 2 platforms have been very, very significant for us in terms of some of our outcomes over the last 2 years. The first and foremost of those outcomes was our digital collection. So we chose Cortex. Cortex is a platform developed by Adam Matthew. Some representatives are here with us today. It's actually the platform that they host their content on. We were a very early partner in that and adopting it, and it has worked beautifully for us. It has allowed us to not just host content on one platform, so we've migrated dozens of digital special collections onto here. It's also allowed us to begin shrinking those digital branch libraries again from a technical point of view. It's also allowed us to do digital exhibitions on the same platform, as well as improved discoverability, improved indexing, and an improved viewing experience for anyone who interacts with this content, which of course we want them to do. It also allowed us, when we compared, we realized very serendipitously that we could use Cortex in conjunction with Kaltura and our long-standing institutional repository, Digital Commons, to help solve a problem that one of our campus partners brought to us. At Syracuse, the Institute for Veteran and Military Families is a significant think tank enterprise. IVMF, as it's known, pulls in tens of millions of dollars in grant funding annually to work on economic and employment opportunities and entrepreneurship opportunities for veterans. They have a growing corpus of applied social science research that they wanted to organize better and distribute out to their community. So we put those 3 things together. Cortex is the surface layer on this, and underneath it is Kaltura and Digital Commons, and it's worked beautifully for them and for us. If you want to know more about our model and some of the details of these actual cases that I've mentioned, Deirdre Joyce, who I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, wrote about this in a recent Against the Grain article. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Caroline Allen. I'm the ophthalmology librarian at University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics.
I'm Amy Minix. I'm the neurohealth sciences librarian at Indiana University Bloomington.
Willa Tavernier, research impact and open scholarship librarian at IU Bloomington.
So the Association of Vision Science Librarians Vetted Journal Committee vets vision science journals in order to support librarians and researchers in their research and publication efforts. In my work on the committee, I've been exposed to a myriad of issues predatory journals cause. One day in my library, a patron requested an article, and in going to find it, I recognized it as being from a journal that I had found did not meet the criteria for the vetted journals list. I've evaluated journals for this patron before, and so I mentioned this when I sent them the article, and they thanked me for letting them know, but it made me wonder, is that what I should have done, or should I be checking the quality of every journal I receive an article request for? When I reached out to others, I seemed to find a new answer for every person who responded. There was no consensus, and no one seemed sure what the answer should be. I found, and others reported, little guidance from their institutions. I found that my patrons' preferences for what I should do were different than what I would have assumed. Every single one that I talked to wanted me to evaluate the journals they made article requests from and to let them know if I found the journal to be potentially predatory.
So there were several considerations that we looked into and considered when kind of framing this project. One is the different type of institutions we exist in. So Caroline's at a hospital, I'm in an academic library, and so thinking through like what departments are available to us. So we have interlibrary loan. Caroline's answering these questions by herself, and where patrons might be finding information. Are they finding these sources on Twitter, other kind of social media? And then in units that have multi kind of departments, is there clear communication about expectations and workflows when vetting journal articles across the spectrum, but particularly in optometry sciences?
So one of the first things we looked at is where inquiries come from. For me as open scholarship librarian, most of the time subject librarians would might forward me inquiries from faculty and researchers. Some faculty and researchers will contact me themselves. And also because I manage the open access fund, sometimes I'm the one raising the issue with researchers from the other side about where they're planning to publish their article and whether it's eligible for our fund if it meets the eligibility criteria. We started using the Scopus bibliometric database, planning to analyze citation data to identify the channels by which poor quality journals were getting into the ecosystem through citation. But we quickly realized that wasn't what we were most interested in. However, in the process, we realized that PubMed provided a sort of backdoor into the ecosystem because grant-funded researchers could submit their research to the platform directly, even if the publication itself is not indexed by Medline or PMC, and even if the publisher had no direct deposit arrangements. A multiplicity of issues and factors came up, and we did try a couple of other approaches before we realized that what we wanted to focus on was librarians' attitudes, what they thought was their responsibility and what their workflows might be, and also patron attitudes in comparison, what their expectations are of librarians. So we decided to construct a survey, and Caroline will now give some more information about that.
So we'll be reaching out to librarians in the Midwest chapter of the Medical Library Association with a survey. At the end of the survey, they'll have the option to opt into a short interview with us, and we'll also be asking them to send another survey to their patrons so we can learn about their expectations. Our librarian survey is 11 questions long, and we're asking librarians who they feel is responsible for vetting journals, but we also want to know how comfortable they feel vetting journals and what resources they're aware of and what resources they actually use. This also includes some demographic information. The optional follow-up interview will be at most 30 minutes. The interview will allow us to further explore librarians' responses to the survey questions, asking them why they answered a specific way, and exploring any divergences in their answers. We'll also be asking what sort of training they've received and how comfortable they feel vetting journals. This interview will also give us the ability to explore other questions and topics that may arise during the conversation. Our patron survey is shorter at 5 questions. We're asking patrons whether they assume librarians vet their article requests and what sort of response they would want if the librarian did vet the journal and found it to be predatory. Would they want to be told or not?
So we've created a project website which you can use to get in contact with us. You can get to it by this QR code. We are from 2 different institutions, so we are still waiting on one institution's IRB to launch the survey. But in the meantime, you can contact us using the website if you're interested. When we do launch the survey, we will make it available via the website. We're starting with the Midwest MLA chapter, but we hope to expand it in the future. That's also another way of reaching the website, and there's a contact us link if you're interested perhaps in the results or at some future point in taking part.
Oh, thank you.
Everyone's so prompt today. Thank you.
Thank you for viewing our snapshot on OA Monograph Infrastructure, Metadata, Marketing, and Consumption. I'm Dylan Mohr, the Open Scholarship Librarian at Syracuse University, and my co-presenter is Rachel Fox Von Swearingen, Collections Lead Librarian. There was once a world. It was an imperfect world to be sure, but it was a world where academic presses, libraries, and authors all benefited to some degree from one another's work. Authors wrote books that publishers would print, libraries would make up the lion's share of that print market, and libraries would then make those works available to their patrons and keep the scholarly conversation afloat. Authors' careers benefited from the promotion and marketing of their books done by the publishers that sought to, maybe, make a few bucks on the initial sales. And as a result, libraries would receive clean records of publishers' lists, which would power collections discovery. Open access, and specifically open access monographs, upset this world. Nevertheless, a few things remained unchanged. Libraries still fund monographs through clever new models like fund to mission or direct to open, and authors still write books and get citations to support promotion and tenure. But otherwise, the ecosystem has yet to fully recalibrate. Much of the discussion of open access monograph publishing models focuses on the financial stability of the model, which is to say, the benefits to the ecosystem of the publisher. The needs of the library and the needs of the author are often overlooked. Authors find themselves asking about their publisher's commitment to their work. In my position as open scholarship librarian, the most frequent questions I receive are, what motivations do publishers have to market and promote my book if they make all their money up front? What type of editing and indexing services will my book receive if I make it open access? Why, they ask me, would their publisher spend money to prune, polish, and finally publicize their work if they stand to gain nothing from that investment? Try as I might to explain the shifts in the market, to explain innovative OA monograph models, fears of predatory publishing at worst and ambivalent publishers at best are often too deeply rooted for me to make much headway. Even authors whose values align with open access publishing, authors seeking to make their work more widely accessible, even these authors express concern, often based on anecdotal evidence, about their books not being ingested into library catalogs and therefore not reaching their traditional audience.
As a collection development librarian, I agree that open monographs are underrepresented in our catalogs. Metadata discovery is now divorced from the exchange of funding, which disrupts library workflows. Publishers are no longer incentivized to deliver metadata via suppliers and as part of our approval plans. Funder libraries could advocate for improved metadata services when they are considering funding an OA initiative, but denying funding on that basis would be a very extreme decision. The impact on the publisher is far off and vague in the form of untapped future usage for their titles. They're relying on internet search engines to drive content discovery, while users are still heavily relying on library catalogs. Other parts of the scholarly book publishing system are disrupted on the library side of the equation. Sales, or in this case, publisher income, is now divorced from use, and retail sales have changed to subsidies. Libraries are now speculative investors in the publisher as a whole, based on our perception of a product that has not yet been created. The equitable distribution and diversity of publisher funding sources is now a concern of mine as a collection development librarian. As more publishers utilize subsidy models to fund operations, they're zeroing in on the largest of the academic libraries for financial support, and this eliminates the funding and influence of their other consumers. An already limited pool of content guiders has shrunken even further, yet the reach of the research is theoretically larger. If publishers treated metadata as their new product, then they could more easily identify public, community college, or smaller academic library discovery partners and develop funding proposals more appealing and appropriate to those budgets. These users and libraries stand to benefit from open scholarship the most, but they are left out of the discovery and funding equations. Without robust metadata infrastructure for OA monographs and libraries, usage assessment is also disrupted. We want to see usage stats specific to our institution's users, and we want that usage data from the same source as our paywalled content from other publishers. If OA titles are difficult to fit into our systems, how can we measure and believe that our users want a particular publisher's content? Even for publishers, the assessment of use is elusive, as they no longer count unit sales. OpenAir and University of North Texas have recently received a $1.2 million grant from the Mellon Foundation to develop core scholarly infrastructure for sharing interoperable open access book usage data, alongside the usage data for paywalled titles. Infrastructure is growing, but again, it's from the publisher lens.
In many ways, open access publishing has revealed the value of metadata itself in scholarly communication. It's a huge piece in the discovery, marketing, and consumption components of scholarly communication. A monograph is a monograph regardless of how it's paid for. The lack of a streamlined infrastructure for OA monograph metadata workflows is damaging the integrity of scholarly communication system. A more robust commitment to the OA monograph metadata distribution will increase usage and, in turn, citations. Publishers and librarians, we suggest, should view OA metadata infrastructure as a vital aspect in their continued roles in driving the consumption of titles and the sustainability of OA monograph ecosystem more broadly.
Yes. Okay, and we have someone to bring around the microphone. Dylan's going to join us, and we don't have too much time. I open the floor to questions, comments. So I guess I'll start with the vision science folks. Do you think that the faculty or the practices of your population are going to lead you to any conclusions more generally, or are things discipline specific, do you think?
I think what we're going to find is that it has more to do with the type of library that you're in. So I'm a solo librarian in a hospital library, and I think that my perspective and my patron's perspective is going to be different than in a larger academic library. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm somewhat removed from interlibrary loan requests, so I do have some rogue faculty who will reach out to me personally, but it's less on the level that Caroline experiences. So I think it's just trying to open the door to see like what conversations are happening with interlibrary loan departments, with faculty, and to our point, do we even say, hey, this is from a predatory journal? Do you just send it? Do you send it and give it a warning? Do you not send it? So just trying to figure out how people kind of approach that aspect of information sharing.
But subject to that difference in type of library and where the requests come, just because in the literature, when we started looking at this, there's so much homogeneity in identifying this problem broadly across so many disciplines. I think we might find that the problem will be the same across disciplines. How they tackle it might be different, but we hope to, as time goes on, keep broadening the scope so that we can come up with some general guidelines out of the project.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Could you say who you are before you pose your question?
Yes, I'm Bob Boise from Springer Nature. And my question is for Rachel and Dylan. And it has to do with what they were talking about, the promotion of OA monographs. And I wonder, you know, I feel like Johnny Appleseed a little bit because I often will, you know, go after a library that I do a discovery audit and they're not curating our open access books. Very self-serving, I know, but if they're not, I will ask them to do it. But that's just onesie-twosie. So I'm thinking that, is there a place for some kind of intermediary? And I'm thinking about, you know, the role that Directory of Open Access Books, or, you know, something like that, where there would be a kind of a vetting that would go on between publishers and libraries, and even a kind of a notification system, like, we think this meets, you know, criteria. And I mean, I don't know about you. Anyway, a notice system, would that serve any purpose?
Oh, absolutely. I had to cut part of my presentation short, but that that notification service, and see, this is what in a print world our approval plans with vendors like that would do, where, okay, so right now for Springer Nature titles for the open access ones, I have to go into my electronic resource management system, scroll through, there's not really a good limiter for open access collections. I have to be like, okay, so is this paywalled or is this not? And I have to activate it. And I'm not a cataloger, and so that's not my job to go through that. However, if we do have things like approvals, things where that open access book metadata is showing up in the places where collection development librarians are collecting. Because my idea of collecting for open access is I'm selecting what my tech services people then import into the catalog. So yes, okay, but we already have that infrastructure, so why are we not using it? We have it for print, or for anything that has a paywall.
So we're at 4:40. There is a little break built in before the next session, so if people want to linger for another question or so, but I just wanted to let you know we are at our time period. I really appreciate everyone, such a diverse group of presentations. Thank you all for your engagement and interest in coming to this late afternoon session. Any last minute questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Could you come?
Sure.
And
I have a comment. I really didn't have time to elaborate on it, but we have had an OER initiative in Alabama for 5+ years. When I've traveled around the state, I've come to realize OER is great, but one size does not fit all. So one of the reasons we went with Springer Nature was because, one, scholarly publications, and then when you do a deep dive, there's all kinds of interesting things there, proceedings, briefs, and importantly, monographs. And when I saw a lot of those monographs, I thought these could be used as textbooks. So the hope is that a lot of our faculty members will adopt these ebooks and use them as their textbooks. So fingers crossed. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, everyone.